Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, as we did last week, I promise you we will get to every one of the home teams tonight. Of course, we'll talk Pelicans, everything that's going on in the Orlando bubble. We'll talk about the New Orleans Saints. They prepare for their training camp. Of course, we'll also talk about the Tulane Green Wave and the LSU Tigers as they prepare for their fall camp. And high school football, we'll touch on that as well. A great guest tonight, one of our favorite. Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports joins us on the program tonight. Sean, welcome back to the show. Always good to have you, my friend.
Great to be back. Just came back from a few days vacation,
Yep.
So it's good to rejoin, get back into the sports routine with you, Eric.
Yep, and of course, you know, I have makeup on. He needs no makeup. He's got the natural tan going, coming back from his little vacation with the family. It's good to have you back. And boy, I tell you, such a weird time, isn't it? I mean, you and I were discussing it before we came on. I mean, right now, again, you set your vacation up, because again, training camp going to start at the end of the month. Of course, we know again the end of the month is when the NBA will restart their season. Now, again, some speculation on again when the high school season will start. Today, there's been at least stories out there now about again how the protocols and testing will be for the Power 5 conferences. On how they're going to handle this. We've seen conferences that have canceled. We've seen conferences that are only going with on conference only. I mean, there's just so much stuff that's going on right now. And again, we haven't even seen a ball, football, basketball, in a lot of cases even, out there, being utilized, with the exception of what was going on in the Orlando bubble.
Well, look, I can just tell you, and it's probably the same for you, that building right down the street, which is where Fox 8 is, right down the street from here, so much of this time of year is prep work for what's about to be the quote-unquote busy season, not just in sports, but in the news department as well, just because of how much the Saints, LSU, are not just a sports story around here, but a news story and a way of life around here. And the uncertainty has really crept in, and it's just, not just with us, but I mean everywhere, because we just don't know, and it's hard to have any sort of concrete exact situation when there's constant fluidity and what you hear on a day-to-day basis, what's positive, what's not, what's the alarming factor, what's a good sign. It's all over the map, and here we are at that time of year where everything really kicks into high gear. It's this mid-July, late July, training camp gets started for the Saints and around the NFL. Like you said, I planned the 2 weeks off leading up to training camp because it is really foot on the gas for the next 6-7 months of my life. But so you do your best, and I got back from my vacation, as I said, with a little bit of different feel this year. Usually I'm ready to get going, and you just don't know how far or how hard you can go because you just don't know what's going to happen.
There's no doubt. Again, the 2020 has been the year of uncertainty. Again, as I've said since the beginning of all this, 30 days at a time is all we can really look at our lives. I don't care who you are. It's 30 days at a time, based on what we've seen so far. Let's start with the Pelicans and some big news that broke today. Zion Williamson has left the NBA bubble in Orlando. He is left to deal with what has been described as an urgent family member emergency. Now, there's been no official comment by the Pelicans or the NBA on what the nature of that emergency is. But again, there's a protocol for him to return to the bubble. He will quarantine for 4 days upon his return to the NBA bubble. If he has a negative test each day that he is outside of the bubble, then he's gone for 7 days or less. Now, again, he's going to be tested on a daily basis while he is gone. If he's gone for longer than a week, he's going to quarantine for 4 days. If he has a negative test in the final 7 days that he's gone, he doesn't have to again quarantine for the full 10 to 14 days at that point. Going to be huge for him to again test negative every single day because you're looking at a 4-day quarantine. Let's kind of set the table here for a second. Number one, they start practice games next week. Okay, so there are 3 practice games next week in which the Pelicans are trying to get into NBA shape. That is followed by the start of the NBA restart of the NBA season on July 30th against Utah. Today is the 16th of July, so we're talking 14 days
2 weeks
as of today. So again, if he tests positive, there's a good chance he's going to miss some of the restart. The 8 games on part of this restart. So this is huge as well. This is obviously everything is unprecedented, but this is even more of a monkey wrench. And you and I were talking about before we came on the air. My gosh, the NBA has done everything it can to be able to showcase the Pelicans and Zion since the beginning of the season. And it seems like, again, they've had one problem after another, whether it's injury or something else, that have again delayed them from, again, showcasing the youngest and probably, again, one of the top stars in the NBA.
I could just tell you, just from I was anchoring a couple of weeks ago when the picture came out of how good a shape he looked.
Yes.
With the mask. I mean, he looked like, okay, this is the guy right here. And it's no secret. Look at the way the NBA, set up the format coming back. They didn't have to necessarily have 22 teams come back.
Sure.
They didn't necessarily have to have that format where it certainly looked like the Pelicans have a pretty clear path to get into the postseason. They did this because they wanted to feature and showcase Zion. First game of the NBA restart is who? Pelicans and Jazz.
Right.
And none of the NBA seemed to have you didn't really hear any pushback from other teams in the NBA. They understand the situation that they're in. This is unprecedented. Let's get our marquee guys out in front, and let's do what we have to do to finish out this very weird season that's going to feel, unusual. But I got to tell you, as you just, I don't necessarily follow every other team as closely as I do the Pelicans, but it just felt like to me the Pelicans had the best mindset of any other team.
I agree.
It felt like they wanted to be there, or at least was going to make the best of what's going to happen.
Yes.
Even J.J. Redick said it. So much of what's going to happen in Orlando is the mindset of the teams that want to or not want to be there. You can't tell me there's some guys on certain teams that have made their money, that are a little bit coasting at this point in their career, that just don't really want to have anything to do with this. But felt like this young core of the Pelicans with this rising superhuman star in Zion Williamson were the team that not only seemed like the NBA wanted to be front and center, but they wanted to be front and center as well. They got Alvin Gentry's clearance and everything else. So it felt like the momentum was and that's why I felt really good about the Pelicans' momentum going into the bubble.
Yes.
So to have this setback, I don't want to debate the severity of if it's a family issue. I don't want to debate because obviously we've all dealt with family issues in the past, but it is certainly a curveball where you're trying to build up a little momentum here, gain some steam as this restart was about to get started.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, look, the news guys comes out at me as well on this, okay? Because I know what's going on in this country right now in terms of testing. So again, we know the NBA obviously already has a contract with a company that's going to be testing, that's handling all the testing within the bubble, so they can get those tests back immediately, so they can know when they have to quarantine. But this is different when you, again, have an individual who was in the bubble and leaving the bubble now. Again, there's a nationwide shortage of testing kits. There's a nationwide shortage of the reagents that's needed for the testing kits. So again, depending on where he's going, is he going back to North Carolina? I mean, is that where he's going right now? You know, again, is there going to be a team doctor that's going to be traveling with him, that's going to be administering this test on a day in, day out basis? How's that going to be done? I'm sure these protocols have already been pushed out by the NBA and, of course, within the club on how this is going to be done. This is uncharted territory for the NBA, uncharted territory for the club. Again, when you start talking about, again, now a person that has left the bubble, that is, again, your marquee players you mentioned, that is going to have to be tested on a day in, day out basis to make sure that, again, he's available to be back, at the very least for the start of the restart of the season.
You got to think the NBA is going to keep close.
Oh, come on.
Close tabs. Probably got a guy or two sending with them to make sure there's proper distancing wherever he goes to deal with whatever situation he has to deal with. But like you said, when you mentioned 14 days and you mentioned the date, it just dawned on me, we're right around the corner here. It is about to get going.
Right.
We're 2 weeks out, and 2 weeks is such a timeline / phrase when it comes to this whole COVID-19 situation. It's the 2 more weeks sort of situation. So it all kind of gets real when you're pulling out how close we are and the protocols in place of what has to get done.
Yep, no doubt. Now, again, look, the other situation here is, again, chemistry. And I've talked about it, again, when the NBA season was shut down for the coronavirus. How the Pelicans were playing, the chemistry, what they were, again, they were playing as well as anybody in the NBA at that point, and then they had the easiest schedule left in the NBA down the stretch. 3.5 games out from the 8th seed, with Memphis holding that right now. Gentry has slowly ramped it up for these guys. Look, injury is something they're really worried about. Okay, when you start talking about a top-notch athlete being away from the game, trying to work out, but again, then trying to ramp up in a short period of time to get to, again, playing at an NBA level. You know, the speed of the game, the physicality of the game, everything else going on there. So he's been Gentry's been kind of slowly allowing these guys to kind of ramp this thing up. Now you're talking about, again, your marquee player gone for who knows, 3 days, 2 days, a week, who knows what it's going to be, but that affects chemistry. That also affects his ability to be able to get into NBA shape.
Yeah. Look, like we said earlier, he looks phenomenal right now.
Oh, he really does.
He looks better than when he was playing,
There's
frankly,
no doubt.
just from a eyeball standpoint. But look, they've had to deal with a little bit of this with Zion. You know, he had the injury. It was a delayed start to the regular season. So it's something they've dealt with. It is tough from a chemistry standpoint. Hopefully this issue he has to deal with is quick, and he's back in as quickly as possible. But hey, man, that's kind of what you have to deal with in this world we're living in, and this nothing normal world we're living in right now. So, look, it is going to be tough from a chemistry standpoint, but when he comes back, you just got to do the best you can in a very abbreviated window here.
Right.
To, what was it, 8 games? So you figure trying to get 5 or 6 wins out of those 8 to give yourself a chance to get that 9 seed, to get the play-in game with the 8 seed.
Again, for those that again don't know, they'll start off the next week. It'll be 3 practice games against NBA teams, and then of course they start the schedule on July the 30th. They play Utah. Then they come back on August the 1st playing the Clippers, on August the 3rd against the Grizzlies. Again, a tough stretch for the Pelicans to start off when you're talking about 2 teams that again are expected to, they're going to be in the playoffs, and then the Grizzlies, who again have that 8th seed. Then it's the Kings, the Wizards, who again have been decimated by injury, and then the Spurs, the Kings, and they finish off with the Magic. Again, when you look at it on paper, and this is on paper because we don't know what each of these teams are going to have to deal with while they're in the bubble. But on paper, it looks like the Pelicans have a very favorable schedule. But again, 1 or 2 positive COVID tests, and then an internal a team could be in shambles, just a shell of itself.
There's a bit of luck that you got to have with this, right? I mean, you take all the proper precautions, but there is a little bit of, we got to hope we stay positive. We don't test positive in this situation. So that's why. Maybe that's perhaps why I felt like there was a little bit of renewed optimism inside the organization, because I felt like midway through the delay, the abbreviated, the time away, I kind of got the sense from the organization that, look, we'll return if we return, but if we got to call it, we'll call it and get ready. And there was a sense of optimism. Look, we know this year was not our year, but we'll be optimistic for the future. We'll do what we have to do. But since the renewal, I felt like the optimism has really been cranked up, especially when you consider how good Zion looks, the schedule ahead, what the NBA did in terms of, certainly looks like they wanted to feature the Pelicans. So, yeah, we'll see how it all pans out. But look, there's so many outside factors that are non-basketball related that are going to determine how this thing goes. You just got to if you're a fan, just sit back and watch and just see what happens.
And look, and then you got the other monkey wrench that's been thrown into this for the Pelicans. Again, that's the loss of coaches. Jameel McMillan, again, is not going to be in the bubble because, again, he has to care for his newborn son. Justin Bigziliak is the defensive coordinator for the team. He will be involved, again, virtually with the team, again, in terms of, again, game planning, going through practices, the video part of it. But, again, he's not there physically in the bubble. So, again, as things happen in game time, he's not there to set the defense up. He's 67 years old. For health concerns, he's not there. So, again, that affects the Pelicans as well. And, of course, we know Alvin Gentry, again, has passed all the protocols that he's being allowed in the Orlando bubble. But, again, a guy that's over 60, he's one of the individuals that's more at risk than others within that bubble as well.
Again, these are not normal times. So logistically, yes, that's a hurdle you have to overcome. I think this kind of you just roll with it a little bit,
right,
in the sense that, look, this is not going to be a perfect scenario. And if you have the right mindset and you accept those inconveniences / hurdles you have to overcome, which I feel like the Pelicans have the right mindset, then you can deal with it. I don't know what the coaching staff situation is for other teams. I do know in other teams, players aren't as gung-ho about coming back.
That's true.
So
there's no doubt.
There's a balance there you just got to deal with. And look, if that's the biggest hurdles you have to overcome is 2 assistant coaches you can't have, I think the Pelicans are willing to accept that.
Yep, and of course, the good news is the fact that, again, they're healthy.
Right.
And you got a healthy Derek Favors coming back. You got a healthy Drew Holiday.
Exactly.
You got a healthy Nickeil Alexander-Walker. You got a guy, J.J. Redick, who had gone out with a hamstring injury, who's healthy now. So you got a healthy team that's going to have, and a team, as you said, that is motivated, where maybe some teams are not motivated to be able to get into the playoffs. And I've said this all along. It doesn't matter what this situation is. Whether, again, it's the situation where, again, you're going into, a different type of scenario when it comes to the playoffs, that this is good for this young team to be involved in this restart, to have a chance to be able to get into the playoffs. And then if you get into the playoffs, again, look, anything can happen because of COVID-19. Look, as I mentioned before, Rondo and Avery Bradley are both out for the Lakers.
Yeah.
You're going to tell me that doesn't affect the Los Angeles Lakers?
Of course it does. And you mentioned something there. They're healthy.
Right.
When was the last time we've ever said
they have
that
not
about
been
the
healthy
Pelicans
this season.
in the last few years?
Right.
Health, just the peace of mind of health alone can clear the mindset and get ready to roll. So they've been dealt a really, really tough hand when it comes to injuries over the last 5, 6, 7 years. So, yeah, all good things when it comes to the Pelicans and entering into the journey. That's why today's news was such a bummer because there had been such a wave of positivity heading into this bubble. To now have your marquee star player, not just for this franchise but for the entire NBA, have to take a little bit of a detour. Let's just hope that it's going to be a quick situation. They'll deal with the severity of the issue, and he's able to return as quickly as possible.
I would agree. If he's able to return, if this team can stay healthy, I think they're one of the favorites to get into, to catch Memphis and get into the playoffs. I mean, again, when I look at the way this team was playing, when I look again how this team, with everyone healthy, again, what Zion has meant for this team when he came back, and of course a guy that really is kind of understated in some cases, what Derek Favors means to this team, again, as a healthy player. So I really like their chances of getting in, and then once you're in, look. You would say, Los Angeles Lakers are going to be able to take the Pelicans in a 7-game series, but we don't know, again, how the Los Angeles Lakers will look by the time you get to that series.
Yeah, and yes, in terms of health and COVID and whatever the case may be with that, but also, when does the chemistry kick up, kick on?
True.
You felt it in the Pelican season. There were parts of the season where you felt it kind of building up. Did you pick up where you left off? Does the extended time away hurt? But you're not the only team that had the extended time away.
That's right.
All legitimate basketball questions when you get inside the bubble.
Yep, no doubt about it. Okay, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to switch to the New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about the Saints. We'll get into some high school football as well today. We'll also talk a little bit about what's going on with the LSU Tigers and the Tulane Green Wave. Also, if we get time, we'll talk about Patrick Mahomes' contract, this mega contract that's out there, and again, how that affects future contracts here in the NFL as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Sean Fazende, Fox 8 Sports is our guest.
Burkhardt Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports. Sean, what you guys got going on over at Fox 8?
Fox 8 Overtime tonight at 10:30 on Fox 8. I will not be on it tonight, but it will air tonight. Sunday at 10:30, we will have the Final Play show. We have been having our Ranking the Saints Countdown. My Ranking the Saints Countdown airs every night at 10 o'clock. Once training camp starts and preseason starts, we'll get back to our regular 5-day-a-week sports show schedule. But for now, those are the shows we have going right now.
Has the NFL or the Saints released any protocol about the media and how the media will cover this team during training camp? We know that fans are not allowed at the facility. Normally, again, the media is on the sidelines with the fans in the stands. There's plenty enough room if you wanted to put the media in the stands to be able to have the social distancing that's necessary, to keep away from the team. Will media members be allowed at practice?
Well, this is what we've been told. There was a leak from Tom Pelissero of the NFL Network that said there was only going to be 4 reporters allowed and 1 camera for everyone.
Wow.
We haven't got confirmation on that. We've been told that perhaps a few more reporters could be allowed in. But again, socially distant. I don't know in terms of testing if we're going to have to be tested. I don't know if it's going to be a rotational basis as far as who gets in and is able to kind of put their eyeballs on practice and really be the eyes for not just the fans, but also other media outlets as well. We don't know how national media outlets is going to impact that as a different group. I know there's different tiers in terms of where you can enter the facility. There's a tiering system. We don't know just in terms of the camera crews allowed in. Right now, we've heard 1, and right now, that's been pretty solid just in terms of what we've been able to gather, but we don't know for sure. There's been nothing concrete, so all of it's pretty much informed speculation, but speculation at this point because we don't have a concrete confirmed case.
It'll be interesting if they're going to do pool reporters, where again there'll be, like you mentioned, 1 camera, so all the news stations get the same footage. When you're doing audio, and there'll be a few reporters that'll ask the questions, and then all stations will share that audio.
Interviews we've been told is going to be virtual.
With
players. At least that was in the leak from Tom Pelissero.
Okay.
So that's what we're going on with this because that seems to make the most
sense.
Unless you can bring a guy or 2 out at a podium and we're all kind of spread out around them.
Right.
Similar to what we do with Sean Payton at the end of the practice. But we've been told, and it's likely going to end up being, at least from the NFL standpoint, there's a strong chance it's going to be virtual when it comes to interviews.
And then an interesting thing is, again, as the season starts, and again, so we're a long way off on that. Obviously, in the past, reporters had the ability to go into the locker room after the games. The NFL or the team would make certain players and coaches available at the podium for the media. But again, a lot of times media is split if you're with a station. Some guys are in locker rooms getting interviews. Some guys are at the podium getting those interviews. How they're going to deal with that? Will it be virtually? I can't see them letting anybody in locker rooms at this point.
I don't think that's going to happen. That's just my own opinion on that. And I can tell you, as someone that's lived with the deadline crunch on the road,
yes,
that's a logistics that's going to have to be worked out, because there's generally there's a handful of us that make every trip, and we're generally good and diplomatic about, hey, who's getting what, and just kind of going through a locker room and getting the guys we need to get. So I don't know how that's going to work out. How do you do it virtually on the road? Is there a way to space it out? And I'm telling you, when it comes to the road, it's not like you have ample space to work with in the hallways of different stadiums or whatever the case may be. So all things we still have to work out on the way on our road to the NFL season.
And still, even again, Fox 8 has a pregame show for every game. So again, you guys are on the field. So again, unknown if even reporters are going to be allowed on the field at that point. Again, when you start talking about what they're doing in terms of stadiums, we'll get into that in a few minutes. On again, what's happening in Baltimore, what may happen with the Dome down the line here. So again, a lot of uncharted territory in terms of getting you the information you need on a daily basis.
Yes. And like I said earlier in the show, I wish we were able to get more concrete information, but frankly, I understand why we can't get more concrete information at this point, because it's such a fluid scenario, and that we haven't quite hit the calendar where we have to know, but we're getting closer and closer to where we have to know.
No doubt. Big news this week that affects the New Orleans Saints and Alvin Kamara. The Titans have extended running back Derrick Henry 4 years, $50 million. $25.5 million of that is guaranteed over the first 2 years of the deal. It now puts him within the top 5 of the league in terms of running back contracts. Of course, Christian McCaffrey leads all with, again, signing a 4-year, $64 million extension in 2020, $60 million next season. Ezekiel Elliott signed a 6-year, $90 million extension in 2019. He'll make $15 million next season. Le'Veon Bell signed a 4-year, $52.5 million contract extension in 2019. $13.1 million next season. David Johnson signed a 3-year, $39 million contract with the Arizona Cardinals in 2018, which gives him $13 million a season, $13 million for next season. What does this mean for Alvin Kamara?
I went back and I checked my notes and my blogs, because I remember writing when Christian McCaffrey got paid, and I made the case for Alvin Kamara getting paid. And it was 4 years, $44 million, with very reachable incentives to $50 million, with $25 guaranteed. Basically, the Derrick Henry contract.
Yes.
Now, you wouldn't look at Derrick Henry, you look at Alvin Kamara and say those two are comparable. But look, Tennessee ran that offense through Derrick Henry, and the Saints do not run their offense through Alvin Kamara. But while Derrick Henry is going to have more carries, I think he had over 300 carries last season, Kamara's never going to touch that. But he also had 81 catches. Derrick Henry will not help you much in the return game, or in the receiving game. And what Sean Payton uses Alvin Kamara for, you can line up Alvin Kamara out wide, and you got to respect him that he can run every route on the route tree, as opposed to if you did that with Derrick Henry, you couldn't necessarily do that. So while you won't necessarily run that outside zone stretch boot concept or system that Tennessee runs with Alvin Kamara, you can see while they're different, they're comparable in terms of sort of the way the Saints use him, the touches that they get versus the touches Derrick Henry gets. So I think that's a very reasonable contract that Alvin Kamara could get, if not pretty close to identical.
Right.
I just don't think the Saints have any interest in resetting the running back market with Alvin Kamara. They're just not, as an organization, I just don't think that's what they're going to do. And if you look at the stats from Christian McCaffrey to Alvin Kamara, which is pretty comparable in terms of skill set, I think it's safe to say McCaffrey has outplayed Kamara in the first 3 years in the league, if you add it all up. So I think over the next few days, we'll see how Kamara handles it. We haven't really heard much about the Alvin Kamara contract in the media, but I do think that Derrick Henry contract, and it looked like it was going to be franchise tag, and then they got the deal done.
Yes.
I think that's a very reasonable contract and a very reasonable comp for Alvin Kamara.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going to happen now. $8 million under the cap for the Saints. There are still some needs out there, and you and I have discussed this on radio and, of course, here on this program in the past. I still believe outside cornerback, backup, a guy that can come in behind Janoris Jenkins, who's on the other side of 30, and behind a Marshawn Lattimore is needed, because the majority of the guys that play cornerback or play on the inside for this team are inside corners. They don't have the ability to go out and to be able to play man-to-man like, again, Dennis Allen likes to do. But you also have this lingering out here in terms of, do you have to pay Alvin Kamara this year, or do you roll the dice and do it next year? Maybe you have to do a franchise tag. Remember, as you mentioned, this went right up to the deadline with Derrick Henry in terms of the franchise tag on him. Do you allow that to happen? What do you think? How do you think they utilize that $8 million? And do you think that a contract for Kamara will happen before the season begins?
I don't know if it's going to happen. Like I said, it's been so silent. Now, obviously, there's been other factors at play.
Sure.
Maybe that's more of the silence is more of that as opposed to what would normally happen for a player heading into the final year of his deal. I have not been able to figure out one way or the other which way I'm leaning. If there's a reasonable number, I can see it happening now. But as I said, I just don't think the Saints have any interest in resetting the running back market. And if you give him 4 years, $50 million, that's a top 5 salary for a running back. And I think Alvin Kamara in that case has to be somewhat realistic in terms of where he's at in his career, what he's done, to think that's a fair contract. So I don't know. Now, crazier things have happened. They could come out and pay him top dollar. Who knows? But I just don't see that happening. Do I think a new deal happens? I think it may be in their best interest to get one done. You have the space now. Maybe you can front load it. You don't know what the salary cap is going to be impacted like next year. There's going to be some form of a deduction at some point. Regardless if they've been able to spread it out or able to maneuver it to where it's not as big as we may think. But still, it does make some sense to get out in front of it, not have to deal with any sort of potential holdout. Although I tried to remember last year, I don't think we knew Michael Thomas was going to hold out until the very last day before training camp. So perhaps that's what Alvin Kamara is doing. But I do know this, we have gotten no update whatsoever or any sort of leak about where they stand from either side, and normally at this point you would.
Yeah. All right. As far as the a need, and look, that's hard to say when you have a team that is stacked as they are. When you're in a situation now where again you've eliminated 2 preseason games, we don't know what the protocols are going to be during training camp. Going forward, because this is uncharted territory, as we've mentioned many times on this program tonight. What do you think happens with that $8 million? And more importantly, again, are there going to be more additions to this team as we get closer to training camp?
There always is. I don't know who that player was going to be. I do think they're thin at cornerback. Outside of Janoris Jenkins, I think it's an undrafted rookie that you have. Janoris Jenkins, Marshawn Lattimore, that can play the outside.
Right.
And look, the Patrick Robinson experiment is not going to happen on the outside. We saw it. P.J. Williams is better as a nickel.
Right.
C.J. Gardner-Johnson can do that hybrid safety nickel role. So I do think you need to add some form of a cornerback at some point. We'll see what that player ends up being. Is this a year you maybe save a little bit of cap space and carry it over, given the fact that you might have a lower salary cap? So I don't know what's going to happen with that $8 million. And I'll be very curious to see what becomes available as we get closer to training camp. And what happens, it's going to be a weird training camp anyway. You're not going to have the same, roster cuts. And when it comes to preseason games, or if you have preseason at all, what becomes available in that preseason, that window of preseason and regular season, that wave that generally happens.
Right. Interesting, again, when you talk about now the subtraction of 2 preseason games, not knowing, again, what protocols will be in place in terms of training camp, it makes it much more difficult on a team that's pretty much set now for rookies, even though, again, they've targeted those rookies. I believe all those rookies will make the team. But, again, undrafted free agents making this team. And the Saints have done a great job in, again, uncovering undrafted free agents that make this team, and not just make this team, contribute to this team. This may be much more difficult, even with the expanded roster they're going to do in terms of, again, the expanded practice squad.
Yeah, it's certain spots, I think last year, Deontay Harris, I didn't think last year there was a spot for an undrafted rookie. Right. And he came in and earned his spot. Remember, they signed Marcus Sherrills to be their punt returner last year, and out of sight, out of mind, really from day one. And Deontay Harris moved in and took his spot and never looked back. He's become one of the best returners in the game. We mentioned the cornerback, Joe Bashi out of Michigan State, the linebacker. There's a few. There was a receiver out of Tennessee, I believe. So I think there's an opportunity, depends on the position, but they just don't have the expanded opportunity in a game-like setting to prove themselves. And a lot of times that's where you have to see it. It's great to see it on the practice field. Emmanuel Butler was great on the practice field last year. What happened in the games? So I think that's all situations that you have to look at. And if you're a rookie or if you're an undrafted player, you just got to take advantage of every single opportunity, knowing that the coaches are watching you, because that's one thing we can all attest to.
Right.
Sean Payton and the coaching staff, they watch you and they give you a fair opportunity.
No doubt. Well, first of all, you got to know the playbook. And they had to do that in the offseason thus far. That's going to be number one. And then, of course, you haven't had the offseason workouts and you haven't had the mini camp and the OTAs to kind of prove yourself. So, again, it's a quick situation. And in the meantime, you got to get your team ready, okay, for the beginning of September for the season as well. Let's talk some Drew Brees. Obviously, again, we know the controversy with the comments that were made with Drew Brees. There's a lot of question out there on, again, whether there will be division in this locker room or not, or whether he has done a sufficient job in terms of, again, on the apology train to be able to bring this team together based on, again, him being the guy for the last 15 years. You mentioned $8 million. If Drew Brees is to go off into the sunset, we know there's a $21 million cap hit coming, and again, with a possibility of less revenue, which means, again, less salary cap room. I mean, when you look at this down the line, this is a ticking time bomb based on, again, what could happen with Brees if he walks away. Let's talk about this season. His preparation for the season, what you think he'll do for the season, and then how this locker room will embrace or not embrace Drew Brees.
I think Drew Brees is going to be ready to play. It's a tough situation for him to be in. He's never been in a situation like this. I think he's going to be very diplomatic in terms of his approach when he's asked about the controversies, what he's learned, what he's had to do. I think there's going to be some sincerity in that. I also think, and I said this on our final say on our overtime special a couple weeks back, don't think Brees is not going to use this to his advantage and allow him to be motivated by something like this. His character was called into question.
Yes.
It's never happened to him before. Don't think for a second that a guy like Drew is not going to harness that energy to use it as some form of motivation and develop an edge. And I think you could see Brees as good as he's ever been this season. Now, he's 41 years old. We all know at 41 things happen. But I think if harnessed correctly, I think if he's Brees, the Brees we all know, I think he is not going to be the problem if they don't have any success this year. And I think inside the locker room, things tend to settle when football normalcy returns. Now, you can make an argument this is not going to be football normal this year, but I do think when the repetition of football hits, I do think you'll see a little bit of soothing, if you will, kind of warming, if you will, and perhaps them getting all on the same page.
Let's talk about the acquisitions in the offseason. And a lot of people look at the different acquisitions and, they want to put their finger on, who can make the biggest impact. Who do you think will make the biggest impact in terms of the offseason acquisition?
In terms of draft?
Either draft or you can do either draft or take free agency first, and we'll take draft.
Well, let's see. There was Malcolm Jenkins, who I think is going to be on the field this year. Obviously, there was Jameis Winston, who I think was a guy we were going to watch a lot in the preseason. Emmanuel Sanders, the wide receiver. There was a fullback. If I were at those of those players, the biggest on-field impact right now, I would say Emmanuel Sanders, and perhaps he could have as big of a free agent pickup impact Saints have had in quite some time, because it's such a need, and it's been a need, an obvious need for so long. And you just think if it all clicks, and he's the play you think, with Michael Thomas, with Jared Cook, with Emmanuel Sanders, with Alvin Kamara in the backfield, the way Sean Payton likes to diversify his offense, personnel packages, line him up different places, I think he can have a tremendous impact. I'm talking 80 to 85 catches, flirting with 1,000 yards, 9-10 touchdowns. I watched his tape. The short area quickness, the deep speed, the ability to get in and out of his cuts in the intermediate routes.
Yes.
I think Emmanuel Sanders has a chance to be one of the most impactful free agents the Saints have had in a while.
Yeah. All right. Let's say you mentioned Michael Burton, the fullback who comes in. Another guy that comes in is Ty Montgomery. Again, who was the jack of all trades that was performing with the Green Bay Packers. I like his signing. I think, again, with the injuries they've had in the past with Alvin Kamara, also his ability to play multiple positions, he could be a weapon as well. But what about the rookies who are coming in now? And again, with a lot of talk that Cesar Ruiz is going to start either at guard or center. What Zach Bond is going to do in terms of, again, how they will utilize him on the defensive end. Troutman, again, how they're going to utilize him, again, with his skill set. What do you think happens there?
I think Ruiz is probably going to end up being the most impactful player because I think he's got the clearest opportunity to start right away. Now, if he's not a starter, then we know when it comes to offensive lineman, he won't play that much. He'll just be kind of a reserve unless he's way behind where they thought he would be in terms of learning the system. But, there's a classroom to on-field transition that happens, which is what the offseason is for, that he did not get and he's not going to be able to get. So hopefully he's able to kind of conceptualize it in the classroom and is able to translate that on the field, and he becomes what the Saints thought he would be. I still go back to Sean Payton saying we didn't draft him to be a backup. So I think he'll end up with the way he plays, more of a center and a slide Eric McCoy over to that guard position. Bond is an interesting one because versatile, but sometimes when a versatile player is not quite good enough, he's too much of a tweener.
Yes.
So what is he? I do think they're going to have to figure out where he fits in best because he's not a stack linebacker. He was not a stack linebacker at Wisconsin. Right. That was the vision. He can get after the passer. He can do sort of the zone coverage underneath, let something develop in front of him and make a play. I don't think he's going to be carrying guys down the field. So that's interesting. Zach Bond is another interesting player. Troutman, if he can catch on, I think he gets on the field as well because the Saints have never had a true traditional wide tight end that can block and catch and get down the field. So of those three, I'm going to go with Ruiz, but I do think Troutman has a chance to get on the field. And if Bond can find a position, I think he can play as well.
Yeah, and I think they have a vision for Bond. Even if they're going to utilize him in passing situations, certain situations, well, they'll bring him in. I think, again, the problem is if there's injuries to that position, you've got to utilize him more as an every down linebacker. I think that's where the issue will be. I think Malcolm Jenkins is a roll of the dice here, and I said that when they signed him. You're talking about 4 years, $32 million for a 33-year-old player who, again, obviously Philadelphia, even though they loved him, they allowed him to get away. He was brought in more from his leadership standpoint, being able to get guys in position. We've seen the bust over and over again in that secondary. The question is, how much does he have left in the tank here?
And also the question is, what is his role? Because he's not a deep safety anymore.
Right.
You watch his last year in Philadelphia, he's at the line of scrimmage. There are three types of safeties, Eric. There's your free safety, traditional, deep. There's your strong safety / in-box, can play almost like a hybrid linebacker. And then there's, like I said before, your safety / nickel type player, C.J. Gardner-Johnson can be. So if it all works out, you have a nice three-safety rotation. But I do think Malcolm Jenkins is a very specific role, close to the line of scrimmage, probably playing a lot of man-to-man coverage. So he's going to be on an island a lot. So I do think he does have a lot to prove on the football field. And like you said, he is 33 years old, and they signed him to a pretty lucrative contract for a guy at this stage of his career.
I'll remind everybody, again, the coverage skills there. When the Saints needed to play against the Philadelphia Eagles, who'd they go after?
Yeah.
They went after Malcolm Jenkins.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's got to tell you something there. It's one thing to be a leader, to have the playbook down, to be able to get guys in position. It's a shame that, again, Marcus Williams has not developed into that player yet. But ultimately, again, the Saints went there instead of going with a Von Bell, who again has an upside, who I thought was really coming into his own. Let's talk about Marcus Williams. Big year for Marcus Williams.
I got to tell you, Eric. We're kind of locally maybe not as high on him as nationally.
No doubt.
National media has been very
They got
high
him as like a top 5 safety.
Most underrated player on this. They do there was an SI or Sporting News I was reading.
Yes.
Each team most underrated player, Marcus Williams. Pro Football Focus loves him.
Yes.
So are we being too hard on him? I don't know. I know what my eyes tell me. I just see a lot of times in that situation you see us play in coverage. And he's done well in coverage, but he's missed a lot of tackles on the back end that have led to big plays. Just think George Kittle from a year ago in that San Francisco game that came back to haunt them, obviously, when it came to playoff seeding. So I do think Marcus Williams, there's some growth that needs to happen. He needs to get to that next level. But, man, I was shocked to see how much the national media seems to like him a whole lot more or had a lot more praise for him than perhaps we do here locally.
But again, beauty in the eyes of the beholder.
Exactly.
We see him every day.
Every day.
Right. And again, they don't see the flaws like we do. Let's talk Patrick Mahomes. This was huge. When you talk about this contract, again, a 10-year deal for Patrick Mahomes, an annual salary about $45 million. Talk a little bit about this deal.
Ooh. Hell of a deal.
Right.
Largest contract in sports history. Had the chance to get over $503 million with incentives. There was some money rolled in. Man, deserves to be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. It's his time. He cashed in. Super Bowl guy is unbelievable. I thought it was striking last year because Juan Kincaid and myself had this debate, Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson.
Right.
And I went with Mahomes all the way. I think you saw why. Pat Mahomes was down 24-0 in a playoff game, and they had the lead by halftime. Lamar Jackson was down 14-0. It was like they were down 100-0. Just one guy could come back and bring you back. The other guy couldn't. But I got to tell you, this deal, if you're a team and you have a quarterback, if all of a sudden this next class of quarterbacks coming up, Deshaun Watson, we just saw Dak Prescott accepted the franchise tag. Lamar Jackson, if that's the price to pay, is it finally the time where a team says, financially, I just can't do it. That is too much. I'll sign a bridge guy and draft, go to the next crop and roll the dice at the game's most important position. We knew eventually the price was going to get so high that perhaps teams will consider it. I wonder if that's the deal that does it, because that is a lot of money.
It's mind-boggling. Look, I have the list here of what he's making per year,
Yeah.
and the incentives and everything else. I mean, again, it's the contract is very convoluted, okay?
Right.
But I mean, it comes down to again about $550 million over the 10-year period. I mean, it's akin to what Magic Johnson did with the Los Angeles Lakers when he signed that $25 million deal, $1 million a year for 25 years, which was obsolete within 5 years of that deal.
Right.
But at the time, it was like, how can you give him $25 million over the next 25 years?
Right.
Okay. But again, this is a similar situation, but obviously much bigger money.
A lot of money. And look, hey, he deserves it. I think he is the next face of the NFL. He is the guy. He is the guy. He'll be that starting quarterback face of the league for the next 10, 12, 50. He'll be able to do, as long as he doesn't lose any skill set or arm strength doesn't diminish, he'll be that player for a long, long time. So he deserves it. I just wonder, if you're a quarterback coming up and you want Mahomes money, the realistic response you get from teams is going to be what? Because I don't think you can just keep chasing that kind of money if the salary cap doesn't increase along with it.
I would agree. Let's shift gears first to high school football, and then we'll talk some Tulane and LSU. It was announced this week there will be no high school football until Louisiana reaches Phase 4. There's been some talk about maybe possibly moving to the spring. So far, the Louisiana High School Athletic Association has said that's not happening. But this is huge now. For, again, kids that are going back to school, extracurricular activity, guys that, again, are in a situation where maybe they're looking to try to get that college scholarship on top of everything else that's going on in terms of just getting kids back in school, which is, again, is very, very difficult for parents right now, whether you're going to do it virtually, how this is going, this is, again, that same term, uncharted territory. But again, for high school football, this delay, we've seen Texas, say that they've canceled football for right now. We've seen Mississippi delay for a couple of weeks. Louisiana's going to wait till we get to Phase 4.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed on Fox 8 every night, Garland Gillen has done a pretty good job of kind of keeping us up to date on high school prospects. Just had Arch Manning not too long ago on our air. These kids want to play, and obviously needs proper safety protocols in place. The coaches want to coach, kids want to play. It's all a matter of, does Louisiana get to the point where government officials can allow that to happen? Again, Eric, we spent the majority of the show talking about the unknown. How can anyone predict that at this point? How can anyone? And if we get to Phase 4, when do we get to Phase 4? And at what point in the year do we get to Phase 4? And is it comparable enough, or is it realistic enough to have a season at that point? We'll see. There's questions in the pros. There's questions in college. It's only right that there will be questions at the high school level as well. But I can just tell you, of those three groups, the passion I hear the most from those high school guys that really want to play. It's what they live for. Right. These guys want to play. Who knows how many more years they have, especially if you're a senior. I mean, the road could be coming to an end this year. So I'll be very curious to see what happens to high school football.
And the other part of it is, in college, you can get a redshirt year, okay?
Right.
In high school, there are no redshirt years.
You don't get that, right.
You got 4 years, and that's it, and then you're done. You're moving on. And for a lot of these kids, this is it. This is the last time they're going to be able to play football in an organized fashion, tackle football. So, I mean, it's difficult. And look, there's the other part of this. What happens if ultimately they got to move this to the spring? And you and I discussed this before the program started. Then you start talking about, again, college scholarships, the ability to be able to do the National Signing Day, who you're going to sign with, guys that are maybe on the bubble here, how are they going to get the attention of the schools? So there's a lot really going on right here in terms of, again, if they ultimately move this date to maybe the spring and try to play it in the spring.
Yeah, all interesting factors, because if you've got highly recruited players that are probably going to join college teams in the spring, you wouldn't have them, obviously. Highly recruited players that even were not going to join their college teams in the spring probably would not risk it at that point, considering their scholarships would probably be honored at that point. You'd probably have to tighten it a little bit, just given the fact that the next fall football season, the kids needing time to recover and getting ready to go. So if it were to move to spring, there'd be a lot of logistical things you'd have to work out, not to mention the fact just something as easy as getting into a stadium, because those stadiums, they use it for track, they got meets, there are other sports, basketball, baseball. I mean, there's a lot of things working. And in athletic departments at these high school levels, it's not like they got an abundance of resources. They're stretched. So yeah, all those things would be something to be considered as if they were to go into that spring season.
And then you got multiple sport athletes as well.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you'd have obviously teams that wouldn't be able to do both teams. Players that wouldn't be able to do both.
Got a guy playing football and baseball, or football and basketball. I mean, if it's you
got to choose one.
You got to choose one at that point. And that hurts obviously the team as well as the high school. The Ivy League is canceled. All fall sports. The Big Ten has moved to conference schedule only. We've heard some other conferences that again are leaning toward to go in all conference. This has affected Tulane now with what's going on with the Big Ten, because they had a date against Northwestern. They're not going to get that payday. That was a game I think they had a legitimate shot of winning too, as well, beating a Big Ten team. What are your thoughts on again how this is going to play out? Do you think we'll see more conferences going to just conference only and saying, you know what, I'm not going to play these non-conference games?
Yeah, I think it's probably going to end up if the numbers stay where they're at. And again, it's hard to tell. How do you view the numbers, positive cases, hospitalizations, death? What prism do you view that in? But if you hear people like Mark Emmert saying today it's going in the wrong direction, clearly they're not viewing that in a positive light. So I could see a realistic scenario where things get delayed and then tightened on the back end. How do you do that? Well, you either go to all conference, or I saw an 8-2 model with the SEC. So yes, I think that's a realistic option for a lot of teams to do to get the season played. But there are other signs of hope. You saw NASCAR having people in the stands. I don't know I'm not really sure how many people, what's the capacity of a NASCAR racetrack, but obviously college football stadiums are big and you can spread things out. So I do think there's a very realistic chance that at some point the schedule gets tightened and you go either 8-2 or all conference. Tulane's case, it sucks because obviously that was a big game, big money game for them that they had a chance to go in and probably compete and do well. And
it does affect, again, when you start talking about the FCS, Group of 5, this is where it really affects. There's a trickle-down effect because those are big money games. And then again, that in a lot of cases finance the entire athletic department. Okay, not just, again, the football, but the entire athletic department. So that hurts them as well. Let's talk a little about the local schools, and let's start with Tulane, because I mentioned this last week on the program. I'd love to get your take, because here we go again. Will Hall has now been sitting down with the New Orleans Saints and has been learning again the nuances of the Saints' offensive philosophy, and of course with their game plan, and of course what they're doing in terms of their strategies. We saw that obviously with LSU. Will Hall taking a page here. Going based on what Tulane's doing right now, I talked about this last week, I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, I do. He saw what LSU did last year. He saw the results. Now they don't have a Joe Burrow, but got to figure out who that quarterback's going to be. Can he be the guy that runs, operates the offense effectively like Joe Burrow did, obviously like Drew Brees has done over the years? They're not going to be to that level, but can you get a guy that can distribute the ball the way the Saints do? Because if he's leaning in on Sean Payton's brain, that's what they want to get. It's to add more dimensions to their passing game, not necessarily just an RPO simple read. They want to add a few more progressions and a few more a little more multiple in their offensive passing game. So I think it's very smart. I think Will Hall was a very good hire, but you got to have your trigger man. You got to have your pilot, the guy that's going to land you safely. And I don't – who's that player going to be?
Well, right now it's Keon Howard.
Right.
Okay, he's got some skins on the wall. He's played a little bit at USM. He is the heir apparent. But let's face it, based on what we've heard, and again, we're not in the coaches' meeting, but everything, again, that's come out of Tulane, they were hot and heavy for a grad transfer.
Right.
So they didn't have a lot of faith in Keon Howard. With that said, Michael Pratt has been on campus, the freshman out of Florida. Justin Ibieta is the kid out of Country Day. Again, I've said it before in this program. A lot of people think that he's going to be a guy that is a pro prospect. It mirrors what's going on at LSU right now. You just got finished looking at Miles Brennan tape before you came on the program today. They're looking at the same thing, an unknown at quarterback, both LSU and Tulane.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess in Tulane's case, we'll see. That's truly, I don't know, Howard is the one they're looking at, but Ibieta, I've watched him. I don't want to have local bias, but I've watched a ton of him. And then when he played Amite High School, was it 2 years ago? The way he played, the numbers they had at that school, Country Day I'm talking about, dressing maybe 40 guys, and the way he was able to kind of lead that team was very impressive. In that early game against Amite, which had some studs. This is when they had Devontae Lee and Ish Shopster and all those guys. That was an incredible game. So perhaps my local bias is showing a little bit. I really do like Ibieta and his skill set. LSU's case, it's funny, I happened to bump into a player that was on the championship team last year, and he said, I said, what's up with Miles? And he said he's ready to blow up. He's ready to blow up. His arm talent, his skill, and you watch it, you could tell last year, it was very subtle. You got to watch it, how much he grew in reading defenses, making the right read. He wasn't perfect, but you can tell Joe Burrow's influence on him in reading defenses and reading coverages and going to the right man. In terms of raw arm talent, he's got it, especially on those intermediate to deep sideline throws. He's got it. Now, he's a little robotic in his delivery. He's probably got to tighten that up a little bit. But I think he's a player. He's got a plethora of weapons around him that can be a guy for LSU. And look, it's going to take some time, and I hope people realize Joe Burrow wasn't Joe Burrow his first year as a starter, but I do think there's a lot to work with Miles Brennan.
And a lot of talent on that team as well.
Yeah.
A tremendous amount of talent. And again, people look at the 20 players that are going to the NFL, but they have reloaded. When you look at this class, you look at the class the year before, I mean, they got a lot of guys that are ready to move in right now. Now, again, are they going to be successful as they were when they had the dream season? Probably not. But again, the cupboard is not bare at LSU.
No, but if they can get the offensive line figured out, which it certainly sounds like Ed Ogeron, who's a guy that does not lie to the media. He tells you what he's thinking.
Yes.
The grad transfer out of Harvard certainly looks like a guy that's perhaps working his way into the starting five, at least at this point. If they can get that figured out, and Miles can just comfortable with what's in front of him. You look what's behind him. He's got some young running backs that he can hand the ball off to. You look around him. He's got Jamar Chase, maybe the best receiver in America, top 5 pick. Terrace Marshall returns. And everyone keeps talking about Racey McMath at this point. Not to mention 2 stud tight ends. It's not like he's going in swimming with no one to help him. He's got some guys around him that can be that can help him elevate his game.
Yeah, no doubt. Bo Pelini takes over this defense. How tough is it to transition in a COVID world, changing defenses?
I think that's something to watch. It's something to be mindful of. We'll see the transition takes. I do know it was probably smart to do so, just because just look at that roster. I mean, they have like 22 defensive linemen. To build a 3-4 with that many D linemen, it just didn't make sense when you don't have as many true linebackers, stacked linebackers, off-the-line linebackers. So to go to a 4-3, which is probably more of Ed Ogeron's strong suit, I think was smart. Now, you got to have some guys along the defensive line. Who emerges? You got to have that guy on the edge. I don't know who that guy is yet.
No doubt. Sean, as always, very much appreciate the time. Covered a lot tonight. Thanks for being with us on Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast in this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. Also on Pelican Sports Network in South Louisiana, 9 p.m. every Friday night. And now an additional showing on Pelican Sports Television. That is 5 o'clock every Saturday. It's at 5 p.m. every Saturday. So again, multiple times you can see this program. Of course, also, you can check it out on the WLAE YouTube page. I post that on all our social media platforms as well. I will have a radio home to announce hopefully by next week. I'll let you know what's going on there. there when we can finalize the contract, but looking forward to getting back on the airwaves very, very soon. Again, special thanks to Sean Fazende of Fox 8 Sports for joining us on the program tonight. Also to our fantastic underwriters who make this show possible. Please support those underwriters. And, of course, the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Naila Jones, Alex Chacon, Richard King, Tommy Fairley, and my director, William Hill. For Sean Fazende, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll see you next week with another edition.